Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to introduce today's guest, Angela Tomei Robinson. She's a longtime laboratory administrator and educator with leadership experience across both anatomic and clinical pathology. She's also a professor and clinical advisor, mentoring the next generation of lab professionals. But what I really love about her is her passion for advocacy. She's been a strong voice for our profession, serving on the New York State Education Board and pushing for licensure for medical laboratory scientists nationwide. She's not only led inside the lab, but also worked tirelessly to elevate the profession as a whole. Welcome, Angela. We're so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor.
Let's start with our first question. Can you please share how education has been part of your career alongside your lab leadership roles? Because you're kind of in between the two worlds.
Yes. I actually started in high school thinking about being a teacher or a pathologist, like a doctor's doctor. And my high school guidance counselor advised me not to go general bioscience, which I was going to. She said, "You're very limited in your options and opportunities. Go to what was called back then clinical laboratory science. Now it's called medical laboratory science." She said it's a degree with a career as soon as you graduate, but it's a stepping stone to so many other careers, not only within the laboratory, outside the laboratory. And again, it gives you much more options and opportunities. So great advice. I took it. I never looked back. I have no regrets. I actually got hired as soon as I graduated. I became board certified and was hired by a medical facility institution that was a teaching institution. So I went from being a bench tech to a clinical instructor, teaching the students that were coming in from the clinical internships. I eventually, with my master's degree, which the hospital paid by tuition assistance, became a manager and a educator. That was my master's. And I, as an associate admin director, when I eventually reached that position, part of it was education coordination. So I coordinated and collaborated with the universities to bring in the students to the internship programs. And I love being in both worlds, in the teaching and in the science world. And today, as you had said, I'm a strong advocate. I'm also still a clinical advisor for many of the universities and colleges. And I also serve on the education board. But I love the mentoring as part of the advocating for our profession.
Wonderful. How interesting. From your perspective, what are the biggest gaps between what students learn in the classroom and what they actually face in the real lab?
Great question, because our students always complain that, when you're in the classroom, you're doing a lot of textbook and you have your presentations and your lectures and your notes. And while a lot of NACLS accredited programs do have what we call student labs and they do have some analyzers, it's a massive difference when you're in the clinical internship. And then especially when you become an employee with the automation that the laboratory world has. And everyone has this concern about automation taking over the lab, but it isn't. It is a tool to assist the medical laboratory professional. It is a tool to assist you because your cognitive expertise, you have independent judgment. The National Labor Relations Board in 1995 dictated that we are a profession, even with automation. And the automation, again, is just a tool to assist you. When you're in the laboratory as an employee, that's when the real implementation occurs. Now you have quality control, quality assurance, troubleshooting, maintenance. There are those who love that automation, and those that don't, then I advise them, as I did, go into a field where you still have the microscopic.
Mhm.
Even with screens of microscopic, we still have the microscope. That's why I loved hematology. And there's blood bank and there's microbiology. So we have to embrace automation as a tool to assist us, but we don't just push buttons. And I hate when I hear someone say that. There's so much. I love this chart that a colleague made on the internet. It shows that we have so much more that goes on behind the scenes.
Mhm.
And again, we don't just push buttons, no different than a pharmacist doesn't just count pills. There's so much more that goes on behind the scenes. And I also tell my staff and my students, the instrument is never correct unless you determine it was correct. If it gives you values you question, it could be wrong. It could be false. It could be an error. And you as the professional determines that. So that's one area is with the manual. And I say, don't use the word machine. That's manual labor. We have analyzers, instrumentation, instruments, laboratory equipment. It's not just instruments. The other issue that a lot of the students feel going from classroom into the real world is that healthcare is challenging. And it's not just our profession, it's all the professions. We have stress because we have turnaround times, and you have a lack of appreciation and respect for us, and sometimes lack of compensation because we're behind the scenes. We're not visible to the public.
Right.
There's stats and super stats. There's a lot of pre-analytical errors because they didn't draw the specimen properly, appropriately with the order of draw. And this is all stress that comes to you with the pandemic exasperated a lot. And
Mhm.
also you have the great resignation going on. So I tell them that you need to not get absorbed into the burnout and try to deal with it. And the way to deal with it, I tell them, is advocating. And always, as much as healthcare is challenging, remember there are options, there's opportunities, and we encourage them to seek out those who love to mentor and love to help guide them. And we also advise that they belong to professional societies. And if they don't want to belong to professional societies, there's also collaborating with your professional colleagues on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
There's ways of reaching out so that you have a comradeship and you're
Mhm.
collaborating. And the senior staff, we tell them, this is your future generation. This is your future colleagues. You're a student today, and tomorrow you're a colleague. And we advise them to mentor these students. In our hospital, we made mentoring and teaching part of their job description. So it's a two-way street, but the mentoring and the education is so important.
That is wonderful advice, and I very much agree with you 100%. I think it's extremely important. When you're working as a professor, how do you design lessons that keep students actively engaged in such a technical, detail-oriented field, which a lot of people might even think it's kind of like boring? How do you make the classes more interesting and engaging?
That's another great question. You have to blend all your lectures with visuals and references. The students always complain when I tell them read chapter whatever.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of them are not going to bother reading. They'll look at the notes in the front, they'll look at the questions in the back and try to get away with looking through the whole textbook. When you get to the hospital, we tell you read the SOP, the standard operating procedure. You have to. But then you have to not just have them with book. You have to have them with hands-on visuals and hands-on instruction. So what we do in the student labs at the institutions, we have student labs where they do manual. So they learn the process of what the instrumentation is doing on the manual level. And also to bring in the adjunct professors that have such valuable information because they're still working in the field, and
Hmm.
you bring in real life case situations. I would do that so often when I have a slide, all HIPAA protected. I have a slide on a patient that has babesia or a patient that has malaria. I have a patient here we just discovered with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, alcoholic issues. And the students love looking at the real cases. And that's the best thing, to assimilate the text work, the textbook, and the text work that they're doing with real life situations and
Hmm.
involving authentic slides, authentic case studies, and the patient data into the real world. Great question. The
Yes, for
more you do that, the more you see the students are more involved.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And then you did mention you had a real life example of how you actually handled one of those cases. Do you mind telling us a little more about it?
Yes, I had a situation where, and I had a student with me, a colleague brought over blood work that was on a family member, and she asked me to analyze it, and I had to do it with HIPAA regulation and ethnic. But as I was analyzing the specimen on the instrument, I saw the alerts and I knew right away, suspicious of leukemia.
Mm.
So then I had to make the slide, stain it, and put it under the microscope, and I showed the students. Here we have our cells, plastic cells. This is a leukemia. And at that point, of course, we called the physician, the doctor, and then the doctor took care of notifying the patient. But my colleague came over and said, thank you. Thank you for handling it so professionally, so ethically, so much with HIPAA regulation. And as much as the news was bad news,
Hmm.
we cared about patient care and we handled it professionally. And the students were very much involved in that. They
Yeah, I
appreciated
can
being part of
imagine.
seeing that.
Yes, participating in this event in real life. Yes. It
I always
sounds.
tell the students too that, you're always passenger in the car, but once you get into the hospital and you become an employee, you become the driver. You're in the driver's seat. And I love how when the students go from being classroom to the internship to becoming employees, the light bulbs go off. You see that everything starts coming together. Now they start understanding the foundation that they were
All the
given.
pieces of the puzzle make sense now. They come into the
Yes,
bigger picture. Yes,
exactly.
I love that. I love that. So the next question would be, what's one of the most memorable student success stories that you can share with us?
Okay, it's always so great when students tell you you inspired me, and I love hearing that. And one of my favorite stories is one of my students when she was at our institution in university. I was an adjunct professor there. We advised her there was it was based on academic and financial need. Try out for this professional society scholarship. And then they're always like, oh, I'm never going to win it. I'm never going to make it. Well, you don't know unless you try. It's better to try than succeed at doing nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
we had her apply and she won. And she won the state award and she had money and she graduated, became board certified. She eventually became a chemistry supervisor.
I
And
love
today
that.
she's a point of care testing manager at a
What
major institution. So it makes you so proud to see a student advance and pursue their career.
what an inspiring story. You actually changed someone's life just by giving a simple advice, believe in yourself, go for it, do it. What are the most critical technical and soft skills today's graduates need? Let's start with the technical.
Oh, very much. You have to be analytical. You have to be meticulous. You have to be striving for accuracy and precision. It is so, so important. And pattern recognition. And you have to have strict adherence to safety protocols. So I always tease that I can tell when somebody I'm talking to that's a resident now, or even a nurse, or a pharmacist, or a sales rep, and the way they discuss about quality control and quality assurance. I said, what was your background before you became this career? And they come out with a lot of times, I was a medical lab professional. That's just ingrained in us as very, very, very important technical skills.
What about the soft skills?
Oh, soft skills. I know a lot of times the students say, I like to be in the background because I'm an introvert. But you also have to have communication skills. We don't directly deal with the patient, but sometimes you may. As an administrator, I did. But
Mhm.
you also are dealing with professionals in the hospital, doctors, nurses, PAs, residents. So you have to have communication skills to interact. And you have to have the ability to work independently, but also be able to work as a team in a group. And you have to balance the two and be adaptable. And you have to have time management is very critical, problem solving. And of course, ethical professionalism is so important.
That's great advice. Yes. We spoke briefly about supporting the new graduates. What role do you think should experienced lab professionals play in supporting the new grads?
It's all part of advocating and it's mentoring. And it's so important to mentor your future colleagues
Hmm.
and understand that, sometimes I'd be working in the lab and I'm trying to teach and somebody said, the student, I go, she has a name and one day she may be working alongside you. So you want her or him to learn everything the
Hmm.
right way, the proper way, because one day they could be your colleague. So mentoring is so important. And we encourage mentoring with our senior staff as well as with our new staff. And that mentoring develops into networking and collaborating. So you have to have a support system in the professional world. And again, we advise belonging to professional societies because you collaborate with very successful professionals. But that mentoring, again, is so important at the hospital level in the internship. And
Hmm.
then once they graduate, all the time too, that even though you're just looking at samples, every sample is a patient.
Hmm.
Some of my colleagues come out with very clever, pretend it's your mother's blood, pretend it, or it's your father's spinal fluid, treated with that type of care.
Right, right. I love that. That's a wonderful advice. It brings us closer to our patients this way.
Well, beyond the hospital, what we really need at a lot of the universities is to have these alumni mentoring programs.
Mhm.
We have it at my college. It's so good. I mentored a student this past year. You help and guide them and what she's going through. And then I actually had to join the professional society. And we also need to have at the hospitals and the universities more career days. We need to have more summer immersion programs, they call them. Our hospital used to have what's known as a volunteer shadowing
Mhm.
project and also the onboard orientation once the students come to the university. And as you and I have discussed, it's a two-way street. You have
Mhm.
to want to have that passion and interest to learn, but then you have to have individuals and professionals who are willing to impart that knowledge to you and guide you and help you and get you through, the
Yes.
difficult times.
Yes, it is essential. Looking ahead, what changes would you like to see in the lab education to better prepare those students for the future?
What I would love overall to see is a lot less complaining. I'm on social media now and I see a lot of that because if it's just negative complaining, that's a cancer. It doesn't solve anything. What
Mhm.
you need to have is constructive feedback, constructive criticism, and then come up with solutions. Come up with ways we can improve the situation. And we've seen from surveys that if you implement quality long-term solutions to our shortages and our problems, you will see positive outcomes. So I always say, again, it's better to try than succeed at doing nothing and have a lot less complaining, a lot more advocating. Support these long-term solutions, oppose any short-term band-aids that say we just need personnel. So we just, take them off the street and on the job training. I very restrictive with that. They need the education background. They need that mentoring and professionalism. So we actually advise to help. And this is something very critical now is the colleges need more support of the medical laboratory science programs.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't have that. I see a lot of issues where we're writing letters as the hospital's administrators saying we need these programs, we need them open. And then the hospitals need to offer more clinical internships. At my institution, with the clinical internships, you are, yes, mentoring and training future colleagues, but then you can hire them. That's your applicant pool.
Mhm.
So we
There
need
you
more
go.
support at the college and we need more support at the hospitals. And then we need to have more awareness in the STEM programs that we exist, medical laboratory science, and also for those bioscience general majors that didn't know about the program. We need to guide them to get the education they need and the clinical internship. And there's so much today with online programs, bridge programs. There's a lot of innovative affiliations to help bring them into the medical laboratory science being board certified. So there's a lot we can do. And I always say move ahead with education,
Mhm.
but mentor and support.
Yes,
And I like to see a lot more of that.
definitely, because today's students are tomorrow's colleagues, right? And by investing in them, we ultimately strengthen patient care overall. I know that you're advocating for a nationwide licensure because only a number of states, I believe, is it 10 states that
10 states. It's
currently,
not a nationwide licensure. It's each state to have
right,
licensure.
so you would like each state to have a licensure to
I
implement.
think it's so important as a key priority to get visibility and to get support
Mhm.
and that we need. And the respect that we need is to have that every state, similar to nurses and doctors and PAs and therapists and the pharmacists, recognize that right to practice your profession. They give you entry level
Mhm.
personnel standards. They give you that body of knowledge. They give you that scope of practice as well as disciplinary action. So it safeguards not just the profession and the professionals, but ultimately the patients that we're serving. So I'm very much for that state government licensure. And I'm very proud that we do have it here in my state.
Mhm.
Um, I also feel the standardization of the title is needed to be nationwide.
Mhm.
A lot of universities and hospitals have switched over from clinical lab technology or from clinical laboratory science to medical laboratory science and medical laboratory scientists, but a lot have not. And this was a position paper back in 2020 that all the professional societies are promoting, and they are feeling that it gives us a better identification, which we're lacking.
Mhm.
And a lot of times I have my old timers say, I like being called a med tech, but realize in the hospital world, a med tech is really CNA, a certified nurse assistant who's giving medications. So we had to get away from that. And also, we're not just technology. Again, we said with the cognitive expertise and the independent judgment. So medical laboratory scientist for the 4-year degree and medical laboratory technician for the 2-year degree is what the professional societies would like to see all the universities use, the medical laboratory science degree, as well as the hospital human resources to transition over to those standardization of the title.
Angela, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your incredible insights. Your dedication to education, mentorship, and advocacy for the MLS profession is truly inspiring. And to our listeners, I hope that your takeaway is not just the technical lessons, but also the reminder that mentorship, passion, and professionalism is what makes the laboratory a vital part of healthcare. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I really look forward to our conversation in future episodes.
Thank you. Is that, as we've said over and over, we need qualified, board-certified medical laboratory professionals for quality laboratory testing, and patient care deserves no less. And thank you for doing this. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.